simple truth. The body heals the story. It remembers what the mind can't or won't. A trauma-informed approach to healing built on the pathway connect, move, heal. Kelly challenges performance-based spirituality, inviting a deeper experience of presence, care, and right relationship. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you. Thank you. It's really nice to see all the black boxes with little names on them. I know that was kind of that was kind of mean. Not really mean, just taunting. So if my voice sounds a little funny, it's because I woke up with a cold yesterday. So I might be clearing my throat, or at one point you might hear like a cough drop clicking around on my teeth, but I'll try not to. How many of you thought when you saw the definition, this isn't working like we think it is? How many of you kind of went, like had a little furrowed brow, or like, what is she talking about? What's this? This isn't working like we think it is. Anybody have you don't have to answer the question. Okay, so Tracy, thank you. Now I know one person was listening. Yeah, but you know me, I'm going to give you a title that things that make you go, right? And what I'm really talking about is whether you know it or not. Most people do not know this, what I'm about to tell you, and pretty much everything I'm about to tell you may be brand new. But unity, from the beginning, unity has had two theologies, two very distinct theologies that are not interchangeable. One is Charles Fillmore's, the other is Myrtle Fillmore's. But what's happened over the last 130 years is that unity, pretty much Charles Fillmore's, is what gets taught. Now, this is not a talk about either or. It's a both and, right? And because when you start a movement, and you want it to grow, there are things you need to do to make it grow, which is, Charles was brilliant at creating systems, right? And so, like the 12 powers is a system. So he was good at that. Denials and affirmations is a system, and they're good, and there's a purpose, and we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. But it's only half the story, or half or part. It's not the whole story of unity, but because it's easy to replicate, it's easy to, give to others. That's how you build a movement, right? You got to be moving fast. You got to, things are, hi, little kitty. There's, sorry, squirrel moment. When you're building a movement, you have to be able to move fast, meaning, people were hungering, right? So you have to give them, what is it we're doing? What are we saying? And so that's what Charles Fillmore was really quite brilliant at, was creating systems that were very easy to replicate, to duplicate, to teach, correspondence courses, millions and millions of pieces of literature that went out. If you, wanted to start a spiritual center in your home, he had a whole package for you, and here's what you do and how you do it. But what got lost over the century, more than a century, is Myrtle's theology, which is not at all similar. They're not saying the same thing in different vocabulary or different language. They're actually saying two very different things. And again, this is not an either or. This is a let's get the whole story going. So when I say this isn't working like we think it is, what I'm referring to really is to pick something, prosperity, healing, something that you often may find yourself in in your prayers, in your meditations, like looking at your life and something is amiss, right? And so you do what you've been taught, in terms of denials and affirmations, in terms of how, prayers. And for many people, and I say many people because this has been my experience over the last 25 years. Unfortunately, what I'm about to say, I don't hear people saying it out loud very often. But for many people, what happens is in doing we kind of inherited this spirituality that's kind of built on correction, right? We have a term called error thinking. There's nothing error about your thinking. Can you please? I'm going to, you know, be a theological disruptor and let you know that your thinking is not in error. It may need a little, what it really needs is attention. What it really needs is some caring. It's not error. It's not incorrect. But that's what we've inherited from Charles, right? He's all focused on the mind. Again, not it sounds like I'm picking on him, and I'm not really picking on him, but I'm pointing out what his theology and his ontology around God. So we have this spirituality that is in some ways built on correction. Correct your thoughts, right? It's this mental cleansing. How often do we hear there's something amiss in my life? So, where's consciousness? Need to correct circumstances, or what's going on in your body that you need to correct. What negative energy are you holding that you need to correct. And when we can correct these things, shift these things, change these things, then life changes. And to be fair, as I've said, there is absolutely truth in the power of thought. Our thoughts absolutely matter. Paying attention matters, perspective matters. But somewhere over this last 125 years, Myrtle got, not somewhere, at the very, very early on, she died in 1931. Her theology, her ontology about God really got sort of, relegated to the side and kind of labeled as something devotional. She was writing letters that were caring for people. She, the beginnings of silent unity, prayer. And so, our spirituality, or very often, um, it becomes less about kind of that, the care and kind of awakening, and more about managing myself, more about performance, right? Charles is absolutely committed to demonstration, manifestation, principle, law. What are you not doing? What are you not, that that your thinking is correct if you're demonstrating, if you're manifesting. And that is the exact opposite of Myrtle. She's really not interested in your outcomes. And I'm going to tell you what she is interested in a moment. But it has become, and I'm not saying that Charles said this, it's the energy and the messages that we've inherited, that it's this performance thing. There's something to fix. And for over 25 years, there have been many, many sincere people that have just been quietly harmed by that. Praying harder and blaming themselves when nothing changes, affirming abundance and meanwhile being, terrified inside that I'm not going to have the money for the mortgage, denying pain while carrying grief in their body, maybe smiling spiritually, but they're suffering privately. And because there has been for many people, and I'm not saying everyone, but many people, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people I've talked with, because the teaching says this should work, what gets translated, and again, it's not because anybody actually said this, but it becomes a function of, it's sort of part of the shadow of unity, is because this should work, I must be the problem. Instead of the theology might be the problem. And what if the problem isn't you at all? Right? But what if some of us were taught simply, it just doesn't work the way we think it does? Like there's some missing pieces to this puzzle. Is that making sense? Okay, I got one or two nodding heads. Like I said, I can see a lot of black spaces. Okay. And again, keep in mind, I'm not picking on Charles, I'm actually picking on unity, because it just because it was a movement, right? Needed to move fast. And the reality is that um, uh, Charles's method, what are you thinking? Mental thought cleansing, do some denials and affirmations and, look at what you're demonstrating, look at what you're manifesting, and then you kind of go from there. Well, that has a very linear um, feel to it, and it has a very much a outcome. This is where I'm going, this is what my outcome is. And um the reality is that that was not Myrtle at all. And so one of the reasons she kind of got lost was that Myrtle was very much interested in, or first and foremost, it was caring, right? Not about correcting. She didn't go to the thoughts. She didn't go to the emotions. There wasn't anything to correct. The first place she always went was, where do you feel it in your body? She was all about body. Charles was all about the mind. And so she's not going to it's what I call Myrtle's theology is a spiritual ecology of sufficiency, meaning it's not a, enough is not a quantity of something. She if you I've searched through quite a bit of her materials, the published, and I've been reading thousands of unpublished letters for many years. She almost never uses the word prosperity, um, because she sees it differently. She doesn't hold the same um, thoughts or beliefs or teachings or words that Charles Fillmore does. um, so it's that's kind of, so when I say this isn't working like we thought it should, or it isn't working like we think it is, that's what I mean. It's if it's not working like we think it's supposed to, or how we would like it, it's not. There's nothing wrong with you, right? It's not a fix yourself spirituality here. Um, Charles's place was to go to error thinking, versus Myrtle's place to go was to care, right? She's very clear. She's not she doesn't mince words, but and she's not, kumbaya and pink frosting. She's very clear, but she has a very different voice, very different voice. Um, and so when you've done the work, you've affirmed, you've visualized, you've prayed, you've adjusted your thinking, you tried to stay in a high vibe, I'm trying to move to higher consciousness. Well, just stop. Just stop, please. I know, and some of you might be going, oh, what? Yes, just stop. And because if something still feels off, it's not because you're doing it wrong, it's because of what you've been taught, which is something that was never designed to hold your actual life, your whole life, right? So it's because error thinking over time had some shame attached to it. Why, we all know, how many of you, raise your hand, and maybe you can just do a thumbs up if you're not on screen, but how many of you have heard the phrase, we have work to do. Are you doing the work? Are you doing your work? Yeah. So yeah, look at all these thumbs. Yes. Stop saying that. Because I say stop saying that because it becomes self-surveillance, right? It becomes self-surveillance. If something's not happening the way I think it should or would like it to, then again, I'm not doing the work. So now I'm coming back to this self-surveillance thing. Um, and I'm like, okay, get rid of that. The problem isn't you, right? Doing the work has quietly become a way to prove your worth. See, well, I'm doing the work, but I don't want you doing it. It's not work. I want us to shift our perspective, shift our thinking, I don't even want you to shift your thinking. I want you to shift your attention and your focus to your body, because there's nothing wrong, right? You're not doing anything wrong. There is no error thinking. You just haven't gotten to the body yet. Um, Charles Fillmore's way is something is wrong, you fix it, you improve the outcome. That's absolutely true. Mm, And that's not the first step. Myrtle Fillmore, her understanding of healing is something is hurting, you meet it, and you restore a relationship. Her question is always about being in right relationship. And when I say right relationship, I'm not talking about right as in right and wrong, but rather meeting yourself where you are. Like there's nothing to get over, there's nothing to fix, there's nothing to change, there's nothing to deny and affirm. What she's saying is meet you where you are, right? Instead of arguing with reality, restore the relationship. And it doesn't mean you stay in, the challenge that you're having or the hurting that you're having, but meet yourself there, right? It's learning how to care before moving into anything else. Myrtle is teaching care. So if you're, you know, if at times you feel exhausted from, correcting yourself or trying something and how come it doesn't quite work out, I know I have been there, then stop, right? Just stop. What would it mean if, to relate to this part of your life with care instead of correction? Care is not passive. Caring is not letting things stay broken. Um, Correction without care often becomes control. So just notice. It really becomes notice, don't fix, right? Myrtle is your body's not the obstacle. So again, in healing. So it's your so if what I'm working on, doing the work around healing and it's something physical, the body, and it's not turning out, maybe it's not working the way we think it is or should. It's not the body resisting anything, but it's the body refusing to participate in your own erasure, right? So if we go the Charles Fillmore route, it's to deny and affirm the experience, the power the experience is having over your life, the thoughts, all of those are you that aren't broken, that don't need fixing. So when something's not changing physically, it's not the body resisting. I believe it's the body saying, "Yeah, what you're trying is trying to erase me, and that's not going to happen." And what Myrtle is teaching is that the body is not the problem. It's actually the most honest thing about you. That was the first thing she checked in with everybody, whether it was a prayer or a letter. She started with care. If you read any of her letters, mostly the unpublished ones in the archives, for the most part, they start with something around care, acknowledging, caring for the person, right? I'm grateful you're here. Um, I'm so glad you wrote. Whatever it is, there's a little bit of caring that goes on, right? Before she keeps moving into, conversation. So there's caring, there's compassion. It's not failure. We've kind of been taught to override the body in the name of growth. No, the body is your answer. And that's what she addresses first and foremost. The body needs to be broad. We need to be in right relationship with our body, right? We need to be in right relationship. Um, and which sounds, wonderful. But we have to kind of unlearn and undo a lot of habits that are unconscious and unexamined. If you've tried to think differently, if you tried to believe something new and your body said, yeah, no, then just be with that. It's not wrong. It's not bad. It's not error thinking. It's your body telling you, I need some caring. When I'm afraid, right? I don't need to go change my thoughts about that. I need to direct care. I need to say, where in my body am I feeling this fear? And I need to go care for that. And what we've been taught is to not trust the body, but to override it, to push through it, to affirm it, to stay positive. And that's not always what healing is. Sometimes that's just self abandonment. Myrtle has, most of us know the famous, her, when she first went to that, the workshop with E.B. Weeks. And we know many of us are familiar with the story, that she hears this statement, as a child of God, I do not inherit sickness, which over the centuries have been domesticated into that, because of what it sounds like a denial, right? Well, as a child of God, I do not inherit sickness, right? It sounds like a metaphysical correction. But the key is, and if we're not careful, is that we'll hear it that way because we've been trained to hear it that way. We've been trained to hear it as a denial. We've been trained to hear it as a correction, as a way to override what's happening. But that's not how she used it. Myrtle was not arguing with her body. She was remembering herself in the middle of what her body was going through. So at the time she's at that lecture and she hears that, she didn't have tuberculosis, but she had a lot of, what today we would probably call, arthritis, IBS syndrome, asthma, migraine headaches. She was a complete worrywart till the day she died. So the statement, as a child of God, I do not inherit sickness, is her way of saying, is remembering herself in the middle of what her body was going through. But it later got used as a denial. This condition isn't real. I have to override what I'm experiencing. I need to fix my thinking to heal. Yeah, no, none of that. Instead, it's a reorientation of her identity, because that's what she was thinking. She kind of, well, you have this, so there must be a way to fix it. But she reorients her identity. For her, it's a gentle remembering that my origin is not illness. My nature is not brokenness, that there's something much deeper than what I'm experiencing. She's not denying the experience. She never denies the experience. She doesn't deny illness. She doesn't, she's just refusing to reduce herself to it, right? Think about it. Just like us, Myrtle is encountering new ideas. She's searching for hope, not a technique, right? She's searching for hope, not a technique, not a polished metaphysical formula, not a repeatable method. It's more like a lifeline. It's this moment of inner shift, right? There must be more than this kind of thought. Ever have that? You're in the middle of something and you're kind of like, there's got to be more than this. But Unity later turned it into like a formula, or say this until it works, or, anchor yourself in this. But that's not what Myrtle was saying. That's not what she was teaching. What she's saying is, I don't inherit sickness, therefore I'm not trapped. I'm not doomed, and I'm not defined by this. As opposed to, I do not inherit sickness, therefore the condition needs to go away. Or if I do some things, then the condition will go away. Two very different theologies, very different. Myrtle holds two things at once: a deeper truth about life, that life is whole, present, it's restorative. That's where she leads us. A compassionate relationship with what's happening. The body needs care, it needs patience, it needs love, it needs us to stop cutting things off at the neck. we also can hear part of her story that she spoke to her body and she spoke kindly and she rested. When was the last time y'all, have rest in your day and not, I'll see if I can fit it in my schedule. No, no, it needs to be in there just like when you know you need to go to the bathroom. Well, I need to go rest. It's not any different. Um, she did not use truth principles to deny or eliminate an experience or even the power of it. She used truth, capital T, to stay connected to herself within the experience. Say that again. Myrtle didn't use truth, right? Truth principles to very much how we do today to like denials and affirmations to eliminate to the experience and or the feelings around it or the power we're holding around it. It doesn't mean she didn't eventually get there, but that's not where she starts. That's not where the healing is. She used truth to stay connected to herself within it because she knew that life was in there, right? So it's not, you must be thinking wrong or, you wouldn't be sick, if you were really spiritual, right? Or if you were enlightened, or if you had a higher consciousness, or if we do the work to raise consciousness, do the work to care if you're going to do work. Um, what she's saying and what I want you to hold is even here in this giant mess, in this deep abyss of pain that I never thought I'd be in, or this little annoyance like a mosquito buzzing in my ear all day, right? In all of that, she says, even here, I belong to life. And it's life that holds us. She uses that I do not inherit sickness, not to fight her body, but so she wouldn't lose herself inside it. So when I say this isn't working the way we think it is, this is what I mean. Again, it's not an either or, it's a both and. And I'm just trying to move the pendulum back because unity for 130 years has been Charles focused because that's for many reasons. That's what it was repeatable. It was, we got masterful with the language. Here's a method to the madness. Here, do these 3 steps, do these 5 things, do this system, do this to, to change your life. Change, right? Change your thinking, change your life. Well, it does not quite. I said months ago, I said in a group of people, somebody asked a question about it. And I said, well, it doesn't quite work that way. And someone said, yes, it does. And I'm like, okay, I don't happen to think so. I think first we start with the care, with belonging, right? Do you belong to your body? Are you caring? What does care look like? Looks like a lot of things. And this isn't just about you. When she talks about caring, she's talking about each other. Myrtle, it was a big deal for Myrtle not to be, this is not all about navel gazing. She was absolutely, in pretty much every single one of her letters, part of the quote unquote prayer treatment was, what are you doing for others? Like, how are you caring for each other? Not with metaphysics, but how are you caring? Right? That's where she lies. That's the beauty of her teaching, right? That's the beauty of her theology. Remember at the beginning when I said unity has 2 theologies and they're not interchangeable? Here's the other one. So I'm just wanting to move the needle and get us, because that's where I think unity's future is. I hear everybody want to talk about, well, we need to grow, and what usually comes with that is systems. What systems can we put in place to grow? And there aren't. This is another reason why Myrtles didn't quite, catch on, because it takes longer. It's not linear. It's, you know, caring just takes some time. And it's not that you have to feel entirely cared for to keep moving, to then move into um, taking care of what I am thinking, the meaning making going on. But keep this in mind: caring for yourself, caring for someone else is when I'm all like, oh, whatever I call it, my word is arg. So whether that's anger or grief or, you know, everyone in this this was yesterday. Everybody in my world was, just a village idiot. And, at some point you realize, well, there is a common denominator, which is me. Um, and so then I know there's caring that needs to go on. Caring for me, caring for others, right? And that when I am in that arg, I'm dysregulated. I'm dysregulated. And to try to move into correcting your error thinking or demonstration, or let's deny denials and affirmations, or whatever system, it's like rearranging the deck furniture on the Titanic. If I'm dysregulated, ain't nothing getting in. And whatever does get in is and come back out is going to be from a consciousness of fear, of lack, of whatever. So Myrtle is saying, no, no, pause. Let's regulate the body. Then I'm no longer rearranging the deck furniture on the Titanic. If we're on fire, ain't nothing new getting in. So let's care for each other. Let's start with the body. So the next time something comes up, pause. Remember, you don't have to change it. There's nothing to fix. You're not broken. There's nothing to correct. Where do I feel it in my body? And put your hand there, right? Let's get in the habit of actually feeling our body. So if I'm feeling the, constriction in my chest, I put my hand there. If it's in my knees, I put my hands on my knees. If it's the shoulders, I do the best I can, or have somebody else do it. Right? How much doesn't it feel wonderful when you're feeling kind of out of sorts, feeling like crap, and somebody touches you, and your insides kind of go, oh, that's the body coming back into regulation. They don't even have to say anything. That's the beauty of it. So this isn't working the way we think it is because we're missing part of the story. We don't have the whole story. Now you have more of it. Now you have more of it. Myrtle is focused on nourishment, relationship, caring. You don't need any proof. You don't need any demonstration. You don't need any manifestation. Um, Myrtle begins with experience. So start there without trying to change it, without trying to fix it. But knowing that as a child of God, you do not inherit sickness because it's not a denial or anything at all. It's a statement to remind you that life is holding you in the middle of whatever's going on. So let's take that into meditation. Because I could go on, and I just looked at the clock. Take a breath. You can have your eyes open, you can have them closed. But in whatever way settles the body, in whatever way kind of drops the shoulders, brings you more home to yourself. In whatever way, when if you feel anything that's contracted, if you feel tension, like scan your body for a moment. And when you feel something that feels tight or tension, don't fight it. You don't have to erase what's happening. There's nothing to fix because you're not broken. Don't abandon yourself inside the experience. As you scan your body, if you find a place that has some tension, even maybe a little physical pain, pause and just say, this is here and I'm still here. This is here and I'm still here. No fixing, no correcting. But notice perhaps your instinct to want to change it. When you notice a place of tension, when you notice, you know, the monkey mind, where in my body do I feel this? And bring your attention to the body, whatever place that is. Notice your instinct to want to fix it, or maybe do a denial and affirmation or a prayer, and don't. Just say, I am here. I am still here. Healing requires us to stay long enough, right, for something to shift. Not forcing the shift, but staying long enough until that feeling of bracing for impact is released. There's nothing about you that needs improving. Just notice where you're still fighting yourself. Healing begins where the fighting finally stops. Let's hold that for a moment in the quiet. Healing begins where fighting finally stops. Healing begins where the fighting stops. You're already loved and you already belong. Nothing is beyond care. Nothing is beyond dignity. Nothing is beyond presence. And so it is. And so it is.